Hey everybody, it's Lycia from Caught by Design. Today we are going to be making an etched decanter using etchall etching cream and a stencil that we created in Silhouette Studio. Now you can create your stencil any way you want to, but I'm going to show you how I created this one. So for this project, you're going to need your glass blank. This is just a glass decanter that I got at Hobby Lobby. I found it in the clearance section. You're going to need a stencil, some transfer tape, a weeding tool, a squeegee, some alcohol, and a lint-free cloth. Or you could use a glass cleaning cloth, or even those little alcohol wipes you can get like in the pharmacy section. You'll need your etchall etching cream, the etchall squeegee. I'm going to use this plastic knife to get my cream out of the bottle, or you could use like a plastic spoon. This one is just a small bottle and the opening is kind of narrow, so I'm going to use this plastic knife. And some painter's tape. Now, before I show you the process for etching the glass, let me show you how I created the stencil in Silhouette Studio. I used what is known as a dingbat or a wingding font. Dingbat fonts are fonts that instead of having the normal alphabetical characters you see, A, B, C, or numbers, 1, 2, 3, they have pictures. So you might type an A and get this flower, or a B and get this flower. So I'll show you in the next part of this tutorial exactly how I did that. So to know how large that I wanted my design to be, I just measured with a flexible measuring tape because I want this design to wrap all the way around. So I came up to about 7 inches. And here about, we'll go up about 3 3/4 inches maybe. And that's where I'm going to start. I'll use the drawing tools in Silhouette Studio to draw a rectangle and then resize it to 7 inches wide by 3 3/4 inches tall, just like I measured around the decanter. Now I'll use my dingbat font. I'm using a font by Karina Gardner called Posy Sprays. It is design number 318838 in the Silhouette Design Store. So I'll just go into my text style panel and I'll type out the name of the font. And then you'll see it here. And if I click on the G here in the glyphs panel, now you'll only see that if you have an upgraded version, a designer edition or above. But if you click on that G, it opens up the glyphs panel and you can see the special characters that are there in addition or in place of the alphabet or the numerals. I'll click over here on my text tool, click in my workspace, and then click on the glyph or the dingbat that I want to use. I'm just going to keep repeating that process until I have several of the images, dingbats, glyphs that I'm going to use. Once I have all of the images that I think I'm going to use, I'm going to fill them with black so that I can see them better. So I'll just select them, go up to my fill color and change it to black. I'm also going to change the line color to transparent. That's not a totally necessary step, but for me, I like to see it better with no line color, just the black fill. I've decided I want to add another image, so I'm just going to repeat that process of clicking on my text tool, clicking in my workspace, and then choosing the glyph. To make it have the same fill color and line color, I'm going to use the Transfer Properties tool. That's, again, something that is only available in an upgraded version, but if you select your image or your shape or whatever, and then click on the Transfer Properties tool, and then click on another item that has the same properties you want, that image will automatically be filled or styled exactly as the target. Another thing to notice here is when I click on these images, there's a lot of white space around them. That means that the bounding box doesn't give you accurate measurements. It's very typical with fonts, but to get that bounding box to hug right around the image, I'm going to convert each of these to a path just by right-clicking on them and choosing Convert to Path. You can do one at a time or you can do multiple. Then I'm going to start moving them into place, rotating them, flipping them around, just trying to get something pleasing to the eye for my design. The one thing that I will pay very close attention to is what is on the left side and what is on the right side, because when that stencil wraps around and meets, I don't want two of the same thing. Like I don't want two of these laurel leaves to be butted right up against each other. Now that I've got the design pretty much like I want it, I'm just going to put this unused leaf off to the side, or you could delete it. And then I'm going to show you a little trick I use before I cut. I'm going to change the point size of the rectangle to something above 0 points so that it will print. Change my page size to letter to match the paper that's in my printer. And then I'm going to print this out. That way I can check the size of it before I do the actual cutting. And if I need to make any adjustments, I can do that before I send the job to cut. And here it is, all printed out. And I can just wrap it around the decanter and check the size as well as the placement of the images. This is also a really good time to think about where I'm going to put the stencil on the decanter, see what, falls on the edges or what I might want to use as a focal point. And I think I want these flowers to be more centered on one of the sides. So that gives me an idea of where I want to start the stencil when I go to put it on the object itself. And then once you look at it, you can see if you want to adjust the placement of any of your images, if you want to adjust the size, then you can go back into Studio, make those adjustments, print it out again, and then you don't cut until you've got it exactly like you want it. Once you're satisfied with the size and your placement of your images, click on the Send tab, preview the job, make sure that the cut lines are in the right place, and send the job to cut. So once you've cut the stencil on your cutting machine, it's time to weed it. Now, when you're weeding stencils for etching, you want to weed away the part that you want etched. It's just the opposite of how you would weed a vinyl decal. If you were weeding a vinyl decal, you would pull off all of the excess around the design and leave these portions. But we want to weed away the sections of the design where we want the etching cream to go. So I've already gotten it started, and I'm going to finish it here. And you want to make sure you get all the pieces. You might want to refer back to your printed copy or maybe to what's on your screen, just to make sure you get all your pieces, because sometimes it's easy to miss one of these little pieces. So I'm going to kind of compare that, make sure everything is weeded. Looks good. And then I'm going to pull off, I've got a weeding box around this design, which was this border here. And so I'm going to take off this excess so that all I'm left with is the stencil, because that's the exact size that I need to go on my decanter. Now I'll take this piece of transfer tape. The transfer tape comes in many different, I guess you would say, styles. Some of it's a paper tape like this that works really good for glass etching stencils. It also comes in gridded and clear, but I like this for glass etching. And we want to make sure we've cut it just a little bit bigger than the design. So we have a little bit of margin there. I cut mine a little close, but I think I've still got enough because we want it to stick to our bottle. And then I'm just going to smooth it down. I'm going to kind of work from the center out, because you don't want to rub on it. You could accidentally lift up some portions of your design, and we've got some tiny little centers of the flowers there. But I'm just going to work here, center out, and then we want to peel it off of the backing of the transfer tape. Now, you could, if you wanted to do this, you could keep the backing on it and kind of use the hinge method, but it's a big stencil, and I think we'll be better off to just take away maybe a little bit of this and give us a part to start. Don't take off the entire backing, and you'll see what I mean. We will just have a little bit of exposed adhesive on the stencil to attach to our glass without having the whole thing sticky, so that we accidentally so we don't accidentally stick down the stencil before we're ready. Now I'm going to go ahead and peel this away, just because it can be very, very sticky. And when you go to put it on your decanter or your glass item, you don't want to have to be fiddling with it to make sure you don't lose any pieces. So I'm not going to pull this all the way off. I'm just going to loosen everything. So you'll see like the middle of that flower came up. So I just put that transfer tape back down and burnished it a little bit more with my hand, or you could use a squeegee. I'm just peeling very slowly, making sure I don't see any yellow on the transfer tape. So see, there's part where it's the center of that flower. So I'll put it back down, burnish it some more. Might take a couple of times, because you don't want to lose the little centers of your flowers. I'm actually kind of rolling that, and if I get into a stubborn area, what I'll do is kind of bend it and break the adhesive on the transfer tape. So see, like right there, I want to burnish that down again. And it's just easier to do this now when we're not putting it on the item we want to etch. Sometimes you have to turn it around. See, I turned it and I started going at an angle. But I don't want to peel it all the way off, so I'm going to lay that back down. And I'm going to start over here. Okay, so at least I know I have loosened that. Now, I'm just going to trim back a little area, and I think I'll use this right here, because it's this one, there's not quite as much area there on the design, but here I've got a little bit more leeway. So I'm just going to peel that back. Use some scissors and just trim a little bit of that. So you see, I've got just a little bit exposed right there. Now I want to clean off my item. I'm going to go ahead and take out this little stopper. I'm just going to spray a little alcohol onto my cloth here. You could also use lens wipe. This is a lens wipe that you could just rub that, not putting alcohol, but I think the alcohol really helps take off any like debris or if you've got any oils from your hands, and it just gets it really nice and clean. So I usually use alcohol. Okay, now remember I said that I want my floral design to be kind of in the middle there. It doesn't have to be exact, but somewhere along there. So I think I'm going to just take a piece of tape, and sometimes it doesn't want to stick to these glass items, especially after I cleaned them so good, but let's see if that'll hold it in place. Just, yeah, it's not wanting to stick. It's just for a placement. It's not to really hold it down. I just want to get a guide of where I want that first edge to be. Okay, now if I go and I kind of look at this, peel just a little bit of that back so I can see the yellow really well. And this stencil is forgiving in that it doesn't have to be exactly lined up, but we want it, you know, pretty straight. So if I put it down there, and now I can just see that I've got that relatively straight all the way around, that it's going to meet up pretty good. Yeah, I think that's going to do nicely. And just to be on the safe side, I'm going to put another piece of tape maybe here before I start tearing things off, because I didn't leave much margin there. Okay, now we can remove those. I can take this off. I'm just going to kind of work it around. I'm going to kind of pull that. once it's down, and that's the way we want it, because we don't want any, you know, air pockets or spaces or wrinkles where the stencil is going to be. Now that I've got that pretty close over here, I'm going to take off that piece of tape. And I've got some air bubbles in there right now, but I will get those out before I finish. I'll start peeling that away. And let's see, I got a little crooked. But like I said, this is a very forgiving stencil. And nothing has to line up super, super straight. We just want our design in about the right place. So I'm going to slowly. Okay, now see how that little center of that flower wanted to come off? Careful of those if you've got a design that has little places like that. And that's a little curved at the top. These wrinkles are not going to matter as long as all the edges of your stencil area are sealed down. Like, you wouldn't want there to be a wrinkle that went all the way to the flower, because then it would allow the etching cream to seep underneath it. But a wrinkle like this isn't going to matter as far as the design. You just want all the edges of the stencil firmly adhered to whatever object you are etching. I'm just going to go real slow. See, like here, you would want to make sure that is really adhered well. I'm watching for those little centers of the flowers. The vinyl is stuck down well, but it does have a couple of bubbles in it that I want to make sure I take care of before I actually add the cream. So I'm just going to go around and kind of check those flowers, check all the edges of the design. And you could even take a heat gun and apply a little bit of heat. Sometimes that'll make the stencil shrink just a tad bit and fit a little more closely. Just be careful not to melt the vinyl, because if you get too much heat on it and too close, you certainly can melt it, and then you'd have to just start all over, and we don't want that. Check those little areas there. We don't want to lose our little centers of the letters. Sometimes I go around there with my fingernail. Just making sure everything is like we want it. Okay, so before I put my etching cream on, I do want to protect these areas that we don't want etched. Oh, and there's another little air bubble. I don't know if you can really see it with the camera, but there's an air bubble there, and that would go right underneath. The etching cream would get right underneath that. So we want to etch the parts that we want to etch and not etch anything else. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about that. Now let's take some painter's tape and protect the areas that we don't want to etch. Make sure you don't cover any part of your design. And depending on, you know, how experienced you are with the etching cream, You could leave this part unwrapped if you're going to be very careful, but I prefer to just use a lot of tape and just wrap it really, really well. I feel safer about it. And because we're etching all the way around, we're also going to have to make sure we have a way to hold on to the bottle, because we can't lay it down while we're etching it. So to me, the tape is a really good investment in making sure you don't etch something you don't mean to etch. Gonna be kind of hard to get those little pieces at the top, but just get a little extra insurance here. Now remember, if you drop any cream in the bottle, it will also etch the inside. And if that's the look you're going for, great. But if it's not, you don't want to accidentally etch the inside. This one's got a pretty narrow opening, so that's probably not going to happen. I think we'll be able to do that just fine. If I have any areas I'm doubtful about, like there's just a little air hole right there. So I'm gonna give it a little extra tape. Same way right here. Just a little extra. I'm going to cover that bottom part in case I were to touch it with some of the cream. Like I said, I'm an over taper, but that's just how I like to do it. Maybe give it another check to make sure you don't have any openings anywhere and that the edges of your stencil are laying nice and flat. And we're ready to put on the etching cream. So I've got a little bottle of etching cream here. I have lots of etchall here. I've got big bottles and small bottles, and I'm going to use this little bottle. And you'll see that it is a dark brown. If you open up your etchall etching cream and it's a color you're not expecting, don't be too alarmed, because etchall might be light colored. It might be kind of a off-white, or it might be kind of a caramel color, or in this case, this one looks like chocolate pudding. As long as it's still got some movement to it, it's not some big solid glob, or it doesn't have any like crystals in it, you are good. It just, if it's been exposed to air, or if you've had it for a while, it might be a different color than you're expecting, but it still works great. So I've just got some in this little plastic cup. It's just the bottom of a plastic cup that I cut off, just because it's easier for me to do that, to reach in here with my squeegee, than it is to reach my squeegee into the bottle. Now you could You could also pour out a little bit here. I just prefer to do it all with the squeegee. Now when I'm put this on, when you put the etchall cream on, it starts working immediately. So I always try to start in an area that doesn't have any areas that I want to etch. That way I can start spreading over to the areas that I do want to etch. And I liken it to frosting a cake. Like if you take a chocolate cake and you're wanting to put some white icing on it, you don't want to scrape down, because that's going to get all those chocolate cake crumbs coming up through the surface. So you want to just glide it over there on the surface without scraping. Don't do that. Just glide it. Leave a layer or a little bit of cream between you, or between your squeegee and whatever object you are etching. Now, I like to get it to where I don't even really see the stencil much anymore. It's not totally necessary that you don't see any of the stencil, but try to cover it as best you can. Don't worry about how much cream you're using, because etchall is reusable, and when you're done, you can just scrape it back into the bottle and use it again. Another thing that I really like about the etchall is that there's no odor. I've used creams in the past that had a terrible odor and made the whole process very unpleasant. In fact, it made me not want to etch with any kind of cream. But when I found etchall and it worked well, had no odor, was easy to use, it's not gloppy or runny, I was hooked. So I'm going to kind of get one layer all the way over there to get it to start etching, and then I'll put some more on it. We're working all the way around this bottle, so it's a little bit different than just doing one side of something. Be careful. I'm getting some on my hands, and I don't want to accidentally touch part of the bottle that I don't want etched. Now you'll see I'm not wearing any protective gloves. When I teach classes, I do offer for people to wear rubber gloves if they feel more comfortable, but etchall is safe, and I've never had any kind of skin irritation from it or anything, so I don't wear any protective gloves when I'm working with it. Just try to make it even, an even application of the cream. These corners may be a little bit more of a challenge to cover, but just take your time. Love the etchall squeegee. I've used, a popsicle stick or a flat squeegee without a handle, but this etchall squeegee really is the best and the easiest way to apply it. Get a lot of control, and it has a nice handle. Now I've got that on there kind of thick, but I want to make sure that those corners and everything are really covered. I don't know if it's because of the roundness, the edges, or whatever, but it seems to be wanting to glide off of there a little bit more. So I just want to make sure I've got really good coverage, and I'm going to let that sit for about 15 minutes. Doesn't hurt if you let it sit longer, but you want to let it sit at least 15 minutes to activate. And well, to fully activate. It's going to start activating just as soon as you put it on there, but you want it to sit at least 15 minutes to get the full etching there, and then we will do the big reveal. So I'll be back in about 15 minutes. So I've let the cream sit for about 15 or 20 minutes, and it's time to scrape it off and then rinse it to reveal the etched design. So I'm just going to scrape this off, put it back in this cup. You can obviously, scrape a little harder with this. Just don't scrape your stencil to the point where it starts coming off, because even that little bit of etching cream that's still on there will start etching in any parts of the stencil that lift up. Whoops, now that took that middle right off. Let me see if I can get that off. Like I said, it'll start etching that right away. I don't want that to happen. Just got a little wet paper towel here, and I'm gonna wash that off because I don't want it to etch in the middle of that flower. I think we're good. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and go take this, since my stencil's trying to lift up, I'm going to go get that rinsed really quickly. Now we're ready to start rinsing it. Now, I did have this little area that lifted up, and I went ahead and rinsed it before I set up the camera to film this. Hopefully I got it in time so that it doesn't mess up our design there, but we will see. So I'm just going to rinse this off. Now, I have a stainless steel sink, and it's an old stainless steel sink, but I've used it many years with etchall. I've never had a problem. The etchall will not etch stainless steel, but if you have a porcelain sink, you're going to want to rinse your etchall somewhere else, like use a dish tub, maybe rinse it outside, something else. Now let's see how we did with those little pieces. I'm using warm water, not really hot, but warm water, and that helps to not only rinse off the etching cream, but to remove the stencil and the tape. It kind of loosens it up. Now when you pull off the stencil, don't be alarmed if you don't see the etching right away. When it's wet, it doesn't show up as much. In fact, sometimes it doesn't show up at all. And people will think, oh, it didn't etch. Well, it's just because your item needs to dry. And that's just steam in there. Don't worry about that. It's steam from the warm water. See? Our design is coming to life. Dry it off here and you'll probably be able to see it better. It's kind of steaming up the inside of that glass, and it's making it look like it's etched on the inside, and it's not. It's just just the steam from the warm water. Isn't that cute? And yes, I did get that up in time. So that's good. Everything looks really nice. Very pleased with it. I hope this has inspired you to create some etched projects of your own. If you like the tutorial, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a single tutorial. Thanks for watching.